Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 1% Better Recruitment Podcast with your host, Charles Kiriakou. I am extremely excited today because I'm joined by Rich Evans. I met Rich for the first time at, I think it was Hisham's relaunch event of Hector. I think that was about a year and a half ago or so. And Rich and I didn't even know each other. And I think we sat there and spoke for half an hour or something like that.
I think so, mate, yeah.
And ever since, been keeping in touch. Rich has given me so much invaluable advice. And today, honestly, I'm genuinely honoured to have him on the show. But for people that might not know you, Rich, give us a bit of an introduction as to who you are and what you do.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having us on as well, mate. I've been looking forward to it. So looking forward to getting stuck in. So what do I do? Where do we want to start? Do we go back a little bit to where we are now? So I know this is primarily aimed at recruiters and you work with a hell of a lot of recruiters. So when you said jump on the podcast, I was like, well, Charles, I've not been on the tools in recruitment for about 12 years, 11, 12 years, maybe. Definitely over a decade anyway. So why am I sat here is probably the question that people may be thinking. And that's what I thought when you asked me as well. So I started in recruitment. I didn't do a recruitment apprenticeship, but I always say getting into recruitment was my business apprenticeship. I believe it's the best career that anyone can go into if you want to become quite well-rounded commercially. So I worked in recruitment, did well, and then off the back of some commission in recruitment, started my first business, which was a little recruitment business. And off the back of the fees for the recruitment business, I set up the business that I went then on. It funded the first year of the business that I set up that I went on to exit, essentially. And then since then, I've invested in a couple of recruiters, a part owner, and I'm a shareholder in 3 recruitment businesses now, startup recruitment businesses. So that keeps me busy. So if someone asks what I do nowadays, it typically boils down into 3 areas, essentially. So one, I invest in businesses, but mainly entrepreneurs, if I'm honest. So people who want to start their own business. And it's normally B2B businesses. So it's normally recruitment, marketing, some form of B2B service business that I'm interested in, because that's the roads that I've walked on, essentially. Number 2, I do coaching and consultancy, which is primarily for business owners, typically who are going through some growth phases and hitting some plateaus. But it's very much working with the founder as well as the business, because certainly at that stage, typically the founder is the business. They might have some staff, they might have some people, but typically the founder is the business. So ultimately that's a massive focus as well. And then I run a membership called Unbound, which is for early stage business owners, typically bootstrapping. So we don't kind of look after founders who are well funded and stuff like that, because there's different pains and headaches there. Typically bootstrapping founders who, again, want to join a community, want to get support, want to get help from people who have just run a few more experiments than them. So that's the 3 things that I'm up to nowadays. Loads of variety, which I absolutely love. And yeah, working with some good people. So life's fucking good at the moment, mate. So can't complain.
Love it. Well, look, I think from what Rich has just said there, you've not necessarily been on the tools, but I think even if you're a recruiter listening to this, you're going to get a lot of business knowledge, tips, tricks. If you're a business owner, oh my God, this is going to be a phenomenal session for you. I mean, in the time I've known you, Rich, you've given me invaluable advice. You've always been super, super nice to me. And I actually give this advice now to my coaching clients as well, because I remember the first time I spoke to you when I set my business up and I asked you, what book should I read? And as you can probably see, I've got a ton of personal development books. And I might be misquoting you, but you said it's not what, but who. Or not how, but who. And it was basically you can go out there and read a ton of personal development books like you've done in your career, but your best bet is just build your network, go and speak to people and learn from your own mistakes. And don't get me wrong, I've read a few personal development books on my holidays and stuff this year, but the lessons I've learned in my first year of being an entrepreneur in comparison to what I've read in books, has just been it's been insane. Yeah. Absolutely insane.
I can imagine, mate. I can imagine.
Yeah. So look, for today's show, we've got, as per usual, probably about three or four sort of topics that we're going to discuss, and they're probably going to diverge into many other different topics. But the first one I wanted to talk about, because I'm pretty sure we had a conversation about this when we first met, because obviously what you do with your coaching, all around mindset and stuff, but we spoke a lot about ADHD. And recently I've actually been planning a solo show about ADHD, but I think who better to speak about ADHD with than yourself. Why don't we just talk about that to begin with, right? Because you and I, we've both got our ADHD diagnosis, and I spoke to a founder a couple of days ago who said, I'm an undiagnosed ADHDer. Basically, he ticks every single box, and he was like, every single business owner I meet ticks those bloody boxes. So I guess maybe to start things off, because I don't know how open you've been, and you don't necessarily need to tell the whole story if you don't want to, but
Yeah.
why don't you sort of talk us through your sort of ADHD journey and kind of how you manage it and things like that?
Yeah, so to be honest, it's not something that I typically talk about unless, obviously, we've got onto it because you opened up about yours, and maybe that's a fault of my own. Maybe I should talk about it more. It's not something that I've really got stuck into on a podcast, or I typically talk about that much in terms of like content and stuff like that. So, but you're right. Like, I think every business partner I've got would tick the full boxes, and most people who I work with in business, like it is a typical entrepreneur's thing, isn't it? I don't know what the stats are. It's something ridiculous, isn't it? Like I read one paper that was like 70% of founders have got ADHD. But ultimately it is a label. And I'm also a believer in terms of, look, you need to accept certain things about yourself, but also not be defined by a label. Because I think people can use labels as a bit of a crux, and I think there's pros and cons to, like, we're all neurodiverse. We've all got a different fucking brain at the end of the day. So that and again, I could be wrong, and I could be completely being maybe ignorant and naive, which I'm often proven to be, and I'm quite happy about that because that's what growth is. But I think the term, and of course we need labels for some things, but the term neurodiverse is, look, we've all got different ways. We're all wired up differently, essentially. But it's recognizing and being aware of how we work, but also knowing that we can work on that as well. And it's a bit like and again, I don't want to ruffle feathers here as well. Like I've been through periods in the past, probably linked to undiagnosed ADHD and not understanding myself enough, of what would be labelled as depression and anxiety in certain periods of life. And again, it's that attachment to these things as well. So some people may say, I think the worst thing that people can say is, oh, well, I'm anxious. It's like, no, you're fucking not. You're Charles. Sometimes you feel anxious. Sometimes you feel anxious. Or I'm depressed. No, you're not. You're Joanne. And I think we can get attached to these things quite a lot. So I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here. And I can only give my own viewpoint of the world right now. And ultimately that might change, which it often does once you get more data and insights, or you learn from other people. But yeah, I think it was a journey in terms of, look, typical, like, whether it's in the office, working for someone else, even having my own staff, like, staff would label me, you fucking ADHD, you Rich. Like, you can't sit down. You've got one idea, then you're on to the next. And all those typical things, essentially, which ultimately can be really good in business if it's channeled in the right way. I think where I struggled, like, before I went self-employed, I must have had about fucking 647 jobs, I reckon. So it's and everyone says, oh, you shouldn't job hop and all that. It's like, well, it's the best thing I ever did, because you typically learn quite a lot in those first 3 to 6 months, and then after that, it's like that J curve of learning is a little bit the other way. So yeah, I think we probably need to get a little bit more specific. Otherwise, I'm going to sit here and rant about it and talk about my journey. Go on, fire away.
Yeah, go on. I was going to ask you just on what you just said a second ago, because I think you and I are very similar with the ADHD, and I've done so much research into the symptoms, and I developed strategies and things like that. And you and I spoke about what happened when we both got officially diagnosed. And I think you said that the psychiatrist said a very similar thing to what he said to me, where he was like, You're not a gambling addict. You're not a drug addict. You're not in crippling debt. You've got a stable job. Like, why are you even getting an ADHD diagnosis? And the analogy I always give people, and when people say to me, because I used to be very anti ADHD medication and anti pharmaceuticals and stuff, and I just said to the psychiatrist, every day for me is hard. Like, and I know life is hard. I'm not saying life isn't hard, but simple things for me take 100% of my energy. And when I got into L&D and I was told to, go through all of the training materials and then you have to revamp it, that's not the glamorous part of that job. The glamorous part for me is coaching people, getting in front of people, training and doing the admin and stuff. I struggled so much. And the first day I took that ADHD medication and then I just done it all in the space of an hour, I was like, is this what normal people go through? And it was like such an eye opener. So I'm keen to understand, and if you're happy to share kind of what the biggest struggles were for you in your career as an employed person or as a self-employed person, and then maybe we can talk through kind of what happened when you then got the diagnosis and that change in whether it was positive or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's cool, mate. That's cool. So, I got my diagnosis actually after selling my last business. So I maybe, where did I get to with it? So typically, like any business owner, whatever label you want to put on it, runs at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And then I think I maybe assumed when I exited that business and had a good chunk of change in the bank and all the rest of it, that, do you know what? Maybe it's time to slow down a bit. And it wasn't drawn by anything negative, because I like life being a roller coaster. Like, I enjoy it. But I did start to question myself in terms of, look, like, should I be slowing down? Like, should I still be running at 1,000,000 miles an hour and getting up and wanting to live in that fast lane in business all the time, or should I just chill out now and just run a little consultancy coaching business and work a few days a week? And it was like, I tried that and I was like, fuck this. Like, I want to get stuck. Like, the first thing that happened, everyone always says like, oh, how do you feel when you exit a business? I was like, I was relieved. Like, why were you relieved? It's like, because we weren't dealing with like lawyers and solicitors and finance companies, and I could crack on and start working again. It's like, what? You don't want to chill out? It's like, no, it was like I could get stuck into some new projects again. So I suppose had a little bit more time on my hands after to be, I've always been pretty self-reflective, but a bit more self-reflective than normal in terms of where the direction was going after that. And that's where I was like, right, this ADHD thing keeps coming up. Everyone keeps saying it. And it's worth getting a diagnosis. And I did. And yeah, the psychologist was like, yeah, you're banned or he was sound. He was like, guy from Sheffield, really got on with him. He's like, yeah, you're banned or ADHD, was his words. And ultimately said exactly what you said there. Like, you should be sat here at the age that you're at in crippling debt. Your life should be an absolute fucking mess. And all the rest of it. However, you've developed a lot of coping strategies along the way to make sure you can channel it in the right way. So I was like, oh, cool. Does this mean I don't have to get up and meditate anymore? Does this mean I don't have to exercise as much? Does this mean I don't have to do breath work, journal, and all this type of stuff? Because now I know that I've got ADHD. But obviously not. It was just more of a reconfirming that those things matter to channel the energy. And a lot of people, like, I suppose, not in business, but outside of business, would maybe, particularly when I was younger, maybe in my 20s and stuff, like, what the fuck's this meditation stuff you're doing, Rich? Like, why are you doing that? Why are you into like this breath work and all the other coping strategies? Like why are you journaling? You're not a 15-year-old girl. And it's like, fucking hell, like, if I don't, then life would be a mess. And I think it's all these coping strategies that you build up that actually, whether you're ADHD or not, massively help and are a massive benefit as well once you start getting consistency to it. So it's all a journey of self-awareness. And like I said on some other points there, like the beliefs that I've got now are probably different in 15 years time because I've proved myself wrong, or certainly change. And I think that's all it's about, isn't it? Becoming more self-aware, and the more self-aware that you become of your own strengths, but more importantly, your own fucking weaknesses as well, then ultimately you can manage yourself better. And I think if we're talking about recruitment, business, it all just does come back down to managing yourself. I always talk about ruthless time allocation. Like ultimately, the people who I see and work with now who tend to achieve more than person B, they might not. It's not about knowledge or information or knowing more. The main dial shift is ruthless time allocation. And if you're going to ruthlessly allocate your time, then you need to be able to manage yourself, which comes down to energy, mindset, the whole lot. Otherwise, you're not going to be getting the shit done that needs doing essentially. So that's a little bit in regards to, I suppose, the diagnosis process, and I think it's just that recognition, and sometimes acceptance as well, and learning to manage the negative stuff even better, because I'm a true believer that there's no negative without a positive, and there's no positive without a negative. It's just sometimes being aware of what's what, so you can start finding the opposites. And yeah, some people might see ADHD as a negative, but actually it's got loads of positives. Some people might see it as, oh yeah, it's a positive, I'm feeling great today, but then you forget about like the negatives as well. And I believe the same can be said about pretty much anything, I reckon, Charles.
Yeah, no, you're spot on, and there's so many things there that I want to unpack actually, because obviously as primarily a recruitment coach and business development coach, I work with a lot of founders and recruiters that really struggle with ruthless time allocation. So I want to unpack that in a second. But before I get onto that, what you've just said there about the self-awareness and then going through the diagnosis and stuff, I think that's really, really important. And it's one of when I do like training academies, it's one of the first sessions I do about mindset, self-awareness, and knowing what your strengths are. And my philosophy is, if you're good at something, triple down at it. If you're not so good at it, get 1% better every single day. But a lot of people, they don't know what they're good at and they don't know what they're bad at. So what's your advice to people at any level to, I guess, gain more self-awareness and understand themselves better? Because you've obviously done such a fantastic job of that.
Yeah. I think it's easy to say like coaching, like therapy, getting help, getting support, getting mentors, because but not everyone can access that. So there is other ways as well which you can do yourself. So there's two ways about it. So number one is like journaling, 100% journaling. Like, and if you're new to journaling, the best way to start is there's loads of journals out there. I've designed my own, which a lot of my clients use as well. And it's got certain prompts which really help, because it's hard if you're not into journaling to be self-reflective and all that type of stuff. If you just sat with a blank sheet of paper and you're trying to get your thoughts on paper, there's a benefit to that. But for me, it's about putting the focus in the right direction. And there's a quote, who knows who's the root of this quote, but I absolutely love it. That questions are the steering wheel of the mind. And ultimately we get more of what we focus on. So how can we influence that? We can ask ourselves better fucking questions, as simple as that. And a lot of the time it's knowing what questions to ask yourself. So being self-reflective, journaling, reviewing your day, planning your day, reviewing the week, planning the week, reviewing the quarter, planning the quarter, but actually putting time aside to it, rather than it just being, okay, well, my gaffer's told me to do this. Like it's one of the most important things that you can do. I've got a couple of coaches at the moment, typically always working with some form of coach. I'm come off a call this morning where it's literally a check-in for the week, like what's worked well this week, what hasn't worked well this week, where have the challenges been, where could you be better, what do you need to be aware of, where are the threats going into next week, how could next week be an absolute fucking shitstorm, Rich? Well, it could be like this. Okay, now I've thought about it, how am I going to handle that? Like a good coach will ask those questions, but you can ask them yourself as well. And it's ultimately a lot of the time spotting your blind spots. I love a good analogy, so I'm going to chuck another one at you. And I think I put it on LinkedIn the other day. Like, you can't read the label from inside the jar. So sometimes we're sat there and we're blinkered, and ultimately we're trying to find the answers, but we're inside the jar, and ultimately there's labels on the outside. So a good coach, mentor, boss, friend, mother, sister, father will help do that. But you've got to be willing to hold the fucking mirror up. And that's not easy, because it comes back down to, I'm sure you've read some of Carol Dweck's stuff, mindset, fixed growth, fixed mindset, internal, external locus of control, and all that type of stuff. Like, it's holding that mirror up and knowing that ultimately the majority of shit that happens around us, good or bad, comes directly from one place, and that's us. So I think it's a journey, and I suppose there's some braveness to it to be able to take that absolute ruthless self-reflection as well. And ultimately, then you're more aware in terms of, like, you mentioned 1% better, like, then you're more aware of where you can become 1% better as well.
Love it. There's a couple of quotes there that when I go back to edit this and create clips, that I'm this 1,000,000% going to clip those, because those are wicked analogies and wicked clips. Something that I do, you can probably see behind me, I've got a whiteboard in my office.
Yeah.
When I set the business up, I'm solo, right? I don't have a business partner. I've got a few mentors and a few friends that I can kind of lean on, but I was largely doing it alone. And I've toyed around with different ideas of how to keep myself accountable and how to be more aware of what's going well and what's going bad. And something that I work with solo founders myself, and similar to what you were saying, is on that board there every single week, I write down my monthly targets, I guess, like what my monthly goals are and what my weekly targets / goals are. And I split it into 3 things: life, exercise, business. You can split it up into various other things as well. Within life, it's literally things like redo the office, hoover the office, book holiday with the wife, etc. Exercise is literally Monday to Sunday. What exercise am I going to do on those days? And then every single day, like if I go for a run on my Monday morning, I get my green pen and I tick it. And then my ADHD brain goes, oh, dopamine, I've hit my goal, and I can tick that. And in the top right hand corner, it's got my personal records for like weightlifting, speed of runs, etc. So if I ever hit a personal record, then I can amend that and I get my boost of dopamine. And then for business, it's like, how many people do I want to email? How many people do I want to cold call? How many new clients do I want to get for the month? So the week is kind of broken down into things that are very achievable, kind of in my control. The month are like the bigger targets. And for me, I then reflect on a Friday, and you were saying this earlier about Fridays, usually you don't really necessarily do too much on a Friday. Fridays for me is like a reflection day.
Yeah.
And I sit back and go, right, why haven't I done that? What stopped me from doing that? And then that's how I can kind of go back and then reflect and go, well, actually, it's probably because you went to bed too late that night, or it's actually probably because you went out on the piss on a Thursday, or whatever it might be. So I think, what you said there, it really, really resonates with me.
Yeah, I love that. And similarly, in terms of like how I work and have done for years, and how I work with my clients as well, we look at 5 pillars. And these are in no order. Business fitness. So we look at the business, physical fitness, mental fitness. There's a real crossover with those two. Like, big believer that we can go to all the therapy in the world, do all the mind stuff, but mental health needs physical support. So there's a massive crossover with those two. So business fitness, physical fitness, mental fitness, key relationships. So family, friends, might even be work colleagues or whatever. And then the final one is living life and having some fucking fun. And this is
nice.
I know you work with recruiters that are maybe typically in the 20s, so that might be one that they just look after anyway. It's natural. But in my world, I work with business owners who typically, have had some success in their life. They might have hit a bit of a plateau or whatever, or they want to get to the next stage. But they might be mid-30s, 40s, mid-40s, 50s, whatever. However, on paper, the business is in a great place. Could be doing better, maybe. They might be losing the mojo a little bit. Physical fitness is all right. Mental fitness is waning a little bit. Like, as people get older, on paper, they might have the best life in the world, but they forget to have some fucking fun. And sometimes it's like, well, I've lost my mojo, Rich, and everything's going well. Like, financially, I'm all right. Like, physical health is all right because I've done the reps there, and it's just a habit nowadays. Like, marriage, kids, like, it's all ticking along, okay, but I just lost my mojo, and it's like, okay, Like, what have you done last week for you? Like, what have you done? Like, something that isn't a responsibility. People forget that, and all of a sudden, sometimes a bit of fun comes back into it, and all the other dials start shifting up as well because you get your mojo back. But that is one thing that I hate to see, and I've seen it with mates. A lot of my mates are business owners as well, and you, again, on paper, absolutely great life, £1 million businesses and all the rest of it. And they're fucking in a shit place because you kind of forget to do some stuff for themselves along the way and feed their own soul a little bit as well. So maybe a pillar to chuck in there for you. But again, your audience being 20-something recruiters, like stereotypically, pretty good at the fun bit, aren't they? Let's be honest.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, mate. I love that. So there was a few things that you were saying there as well, and I want to unpack the mental fitness aspect, because where you said about the 5 pillars, if anyone from my old business listens to that, they're going to laugh, because whenever I managed a team, I always used to draw on the whiteboard 5 pillars, and it would be very similar. It's like mindset, physical health, finances, business, and relationships. It's relatively similar. But again, when you're in your early to mid-20s, having fun is just the easy part, right? Especially if you're employed, you don't have as many responsibilities. I'm so passionate about developing mental fitness because, you know, I've been through very dark stages in my life, and I've openly talked about this as well. When I was like 16, 17 years old, I was pretty much suicidal, to be honest with you, and I had to go and see the GP and prescribe me antidepressants, put me on like a watch list, because I was like at that, literally at 10 out of 10, like this kid might commit suicide. So when you've been there, you've kind of, you know that everything is up from there, and you never ever want to be there ever again. So I became utterly obsessed with never being there ever again. And I'm really, really fortunate, and touch wood, I never have to go back there, that my mindset has developed, and I'm a strong person now. But for people that are either in their 20s, or even people that are like in their 30s, 40s, or whatever, that maybe haven't gone through those experiences that have propelled them to develop that mental fitness, what advice, what tools or techniques can you offer to listeners, to viewers, that can help develop that mental fitness?
Yeah, fine. Everyone's individual, so the last thing I ever want to do is start handing out off-the-shelf prescriptions. However, again, I can only talk about like my own journey, and it does come down to learning about yourself essentially, and building your own. I like to call it kind of like your own toolboxes. So like your mindset toolbox, or however you want to call it. I think. And again, like some people say, often simplify things, which maybe I'm guilty of as well. But after coaching a fair few individuals, business owners, inside and outside of work, members of staff or whatever, typically the first thing that we're missing if we're in a shit place is an exciting future. Like typically it comes down to that, and that might be short term, medium term, long term. Like you might not be able to see the wood through the trees of the next few weeks, never mind the next few years, essentially. And I think it's a Joe Dispenza quote, which is a bit wacky for a lot of people, but you're either defined by an exciting vision of the future, or you're defined by the backstory of your past. I truly believe in that. Like I've done the reps on that, and looked at that myself when I'm like maybe lost my mojo a little bit over the years and stuff like that. It's like, okay, you've lost faith in what the future is going to hold. So I think the first step as well is, and again, practical advice. Like if someone's in a shit place, I often go through an exercise with people to zoom out, because normally we're just stuck on something, and we're focusing on one or two really shit things, where actually that's 2%, and 98% around of it might be all right. So start zooming out a little bit, and making sure we're focusing on the right areas. Another thing, and I've done it with one of my business partners this week, is having a bit of a shit week, and again, won't name names. Comparing down can soon snap you out of it. Comparing down can soon snap you out of it. So a little bit of a process formulating here in terms of, okay, and I can be quite harsh sometimes, or it might sound a little bit harsh, but it's for the greater good, I'd like to think. And ultimately we can be fucking stressed out about some work stuff, or something's not gone our way. Ultimately asking the question, oh, you know your kids, yeah, are they in a hospital bed right now? Like, what, Rich? Like, no, they're not. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we sometimes fail to see like all the good stuff around, and sometimes you need to compare down to get there as well. And then once we're at that stage, it's typically then, okay, let's reset now. Let's fucking do a bit like, we've got to go backwards to reflect and get the data and be smart about it, and then let's start building out what the future looks like. And sometimes that's a fucking 10-year vision. Sometimes that's what does next week look like. But ultimately making sure that we're putting one foot in front of the other and we're working in a direction that we want to go in. And I think that's another threat as well. Like we might be working at pace and we might be having results in life, or what we deem as results in life. But if we're not checking out and we're just doing it all in autopilot, like we could be going in a direction to a destination that we don't even want to fucking go to. So it's all so important and interlinked, and obviously, is that advice right for everyone? Obviously not. I'm just talking about, look, in certain circumstances, these type of things help. But for me personally, it's very much those processes help. And the other thing is, a lot of that is up there in the head. The other thing is like your energy as well. Like energy is everything. And I go through people with an exercise called the energy matrix. So literally a line like this is nothing new, where you've got positive energy, negative energy, high energy, low energy. And I don't even like to call positive and negative, more like pleasant energy and unpleasant energy. And then if we get really, really self-reflective, and again, really basic stuff, and say, okay, if I said to you, Charles, if you want to be in high, pleasant state tomorrow, what type of things would you do to give you the best chance of being there? And you might turn around and say, okay, well, I'd make sure I get a fucking good night's sleep tonight. I'd make sure I don't go on the piss tonight, or whatever else comes with that typically. I'll make sure that I get up in the morning and I do some breath work. I'll make sure I'm not around a load of negative people who do my head in. I'd make sure my environment's good. You might start reeling all this stuff off. I'm like, okay, cool. So we start putting that in the top quadrant. And then if I said, do you know what, Charles? I want you to be in a really fucking shit place tomorrow, mate. Like really low, unpleasant energy. Like, what could you do to guarantee that? Like, again, not speaking for you, but you might say, okay, I'm going to go out with the lads tonight. I'm going to get 2 bags in. I'm going to behave like a wanker. I'm going to spend a load of time with people that I don't really like. I'm going to make sure my nutrition's not right. Blah, 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 blah. You get the gist. And it's okay.
Yeah.
This exercise alone is a bit like, and I still do it. I've been doing it for years, but I still do it, and I still reflect on this case of, so I'm in control of the output. And often if we look and think, if I wake up or if I'm having a day where it's like, Jesus, like my energy's off, like I'm not in a great place. It's like, okay, I'll go back to my energy matrix, and it's like, okay, I've not been doing that. I've not been doing that. I've been doing that. I've not been doing that. It's like, okay, I should fucking feel like this. But then that controls back. What am I knowingly doing that is impacting this? Well, it's all this stuff. Okay, so it's on me. So then we know how to reverse that. And the majority of the time, taking control of that shit will help. But there is occasions where, do you know what? Like life just kicks your ass and you feel like shit and you need to feel it and you need to get through it. But the majority of the time, it's down to stuff that we control. And the majority of people who maybe I speak to or whatever, and maybe they're not in a great place. We could probably go off on one here and look at like doctors and just chucking pills at people and all that type of stuff. Like, first and foremost, like a lot of the time, I'm sure if a doctor did a reflection of someone's life and looked at their own choices, I'm not saying every time because chemically and the different circumstances, of course, but a lot of the time, if a doctor sat and made someone really reflect on their own choices, he'd probably just turn around and say, well, you're supposed to fucking feel like that. Everyone else would feel like that with those choices as well. So it all comes back to kind of that personal accountability piece. But having the right tools in the toolbox to one, self-reflect, but then start doing the stuff that you know makes you feel good. Like we were talking about breath work earlier. It's like, that's not for everyone, but give it a go. Might be for you, might change your life. You've got people who love ice baths. You've got people who love jiu-jitsu and running ultra marathons. Like not everything is off the shelf for everything, but you've got to find your shit. Like find the shit that works for you. And sometimes like there's some fun in that as well, because sometimes it might be a case of, well, I don't know what my shit is. Like, how cool is that? Let's go and find it. That's a bit exciting. So yeah, I could talk all day about this stuff. And again, it's my opinion based on my own experiences and the own data set that I'm working on at the moment. But yeah, there's a hell of a lot of different stuff, but I think it's a case of, yeah, working out yourself and also being willing to hold that mirror up, and do that self-reflective work, because ultimately it typically falls back to ourselves 99 times out of 100, I'd say.
Love it. Do you know what? Something you said there gave me a flashback to when I first sat down one-to-one with my NLP coach, Ricky.
Yeah.
And I said something, I can't remember what I said to him. I said something, and he had this like unbelievable skill to recite every word in your mannerisms and an entire paragraph and repeat it back to you. And then you hear it and you're like, oh my goodness. And then he said to me, you choose to feel that certain way about that. And I was like, no, but Ricky, you don't understand. Life is so hard and this, that, and the other. And he went, yeah, life is hard, but you choose to see it that way. And then he was talking me through how to reframe certain things that have happened in my life. And like I shared with you a moment ago, when I was like 16 years old, and you brought up then about people that like ice baths or jiu-jitsu and stuff, and largely it is circumstantial, not circumstantial, sorry, it's largely your choices in life that can sometimes cause you to fall into that. But then it can be a chemical imbalance, and it can also be a case of life events happening. And I shared this with a client on, I think it was Tuesday this week or Monday this week, that, you know, when I was 16 years old, about a week before my birthday, my dad left home, just left, moved down to Bournemouth or wherever it was. My mum was still going through like cancer treatments and stuff. I was undiagnosed ADHD, couldn't hold a job down. One of my family members was in prison. There was everything going on. So like most people would be depressed in that situation because so many things were going on. But because I didn't have a job or business to have purpose, I wasn't in sport, I wasn't going to the gym, I didn't have a proper good friendship group at that time. I was like in the naughty kids class in sixth form, so I wasn't close with anyone. I didn't have a girlfriend or anyone to send to me. I had no strategies. I had nothing. So I was kind of going through both the circumstances of life kicking me in the arse and feeling that really bad, but also making the choices of staying and locking myself in my bedroom, not eating, playing video games by myself until I would fall asleep at 5 o'clock in the morning. Like, it was terrible. So I think, yeah, if life happens and it kicks your ass, especially us men, we're largely, I'm not going to speak for every man, but largely we're terrible at speaking about how we're feeling, and we largely ignore how we're feeling. But if things happen, you do have to just sit there and just accept it. And you'll know this from meditating for years. It teaches you to just sit there with your feelings and go, this is the human experience. You're allowed to feel sad. You're allowed to feel angry. But then once you've sat with that, don't dwell on it, which is what I'd done when I was young. And I know a lot of people that do this. It's take action, feel it, and then take action. And then, like you said, go and do something that puts you in that pleasant state, that positive state, whatever you want to frame it. If it means going for a run, great. If you hate running, then do something more fun.
Yeah.
Just go and do something that's going to get you out of that state.
Refractory period. Like if someone, if something shit happens to me this afternoon, I don't know, someone bumps the car on the school run or whatever, it's like, okay, yeah, that's going to piss me off. It's going to be an inconvenience. And then later on tonight, I might see some family or whatever, and they're like, why are you in a bad mood? It's like, someone bumps my car, I'm meant to be in a bad mood, and it's okay. And then tomorrow, I take it in tomorrow, and then all of a sudden, I take it into next week. I'm pissed off about it. The guy's not, just done a runner, and I can't do it on insurance or whatever. It's like, all of a sudden, it's like, it's gone from a feeling to then a mood. And you hold on to it long enough, it comes onto a fucking personality trait. Why is Rich so fucking bitter? Well, one day someone bumped into his fucking car and he's still thinking about it. But that's coming back into that victim attitude, isn't it? It's like, well, why me? I didn't deserve that. And then we start looking at other stuff and associating it, like, why did that happen to me? Why did that happen to me? Why did that happen to me? And we can ultimately hold on to that. But yeah, we're going to feel shit. But if we can shorten that refractory period and like give it the space that it needs, but then start focusing on some other stuff. Like, I'm a big believer. People talk about life's purpose and all that stuff, and like I'm a bit like, again, people may disagree with me, and that's the great stuff about this, isn't it? Because that's how we learn. But I don't believe in like one grand purpose. It's like, oh, you've got to find your life purpose, and once you find your purpose in life, you'll be fine. And I'm like, utter bollocks, absolute utter bollocks. Like, for me, it's more about like finding your missions. Like, what are you on right now? Like that can change. Do you know what I mean? Like, what my missions are this week might be different to next week, and they might be different to next year. But it's having these missions, because what are the missions? It's something to focus on, isn't it? Like, it's something to focus on. It's forward progression. And I believe as human beings, like, we're a big part of being fulfilled is forward progression. And it's making sure we're focusing on that forward progression as well. And when I'm looking at a vision and all that type of stuff, like when I've done it with clients, break it up into 3 areas, and one of them is progression. Another one is contribution, like how are we contributing? And another one is making memories. Like, focus on those 3 things and start setting some goals and targets around that, and we've got some clear forward progression as well. But you mentioned there in terms of like how you feel as well, and again, we're probably going off on tangents. I don't think you've even asked me a question here, so apologies. But I think we knew this would happen as well. I think it's taking control of how you feel. Like in the morning, for instance, you mentioned like the first thing I'll ask myself in a morning, or the first prompt in my journal is, how do you feel today on a scale of 1 to 10? That might be a 3, but most people are, often, if we forget ourselves as well, I'm not claiming to be some fucking enlightened guru who's just happy and high energy and in a great place all the time, because I'm not. I'm a human being. And we all forget this stuff as well. But how do you feel today on a score of 1 to 10? It's like fucking 4. Just woke up, I'm still knackered, could have done with an extra hour's sleep. But the next question is what you're willing to do to upgrade that score. It's like, shit, yeah, I've just remembered I'm in control of how I feel. I can always add a couple of points on. And it's taking that accountability to yeah, otherwise you're going through life and putting your energy on everyone else as well. And that's not where we want to be, is it? Like, every day's an opportunity to ruin someone else's day or make their fucking day. And I know what side I'd rather be on.
Well, what you just said there made me laugh, because I was like, this is the ADHD in my brain, by the way. When you said about waking up, journaling, and like, how do I feel out of 10? I just wanted to blurt out, I never wake up above a 2. Every single day I wake up, I'm like aching from working out the day before. I'm tired. I don't want to get out of bed. And then I get up, force myself up. I know I have to jump in the cold plunge outside in the garden. Today it was pissing down with rain as well, so that was hard. But then by the time I've got up and I've got downstairs and got myself a glass of water, I have like programmed my brain to go, you're going to have a good day. Like, regardless of what anything is happening, you are in control of things you can control. And there are things in life that you cannot control, and that's fine. But you can do things to change your state. And a lot of what you've said actually reminds me a lot of the work that I've done in my neurolinguistic programming, with like the timeline therapies and the state change and the goal setting and stuff like that. But for me, every single morning when I wake up, and my wife is terrible for this, bless her, she's the best, she's literally the best, but she'll wake up and go, I didn't get a good sleep, I feel terrible this morning, it's raining, and rah, rah, rah. And I'm like sat there, and then she just looks at me and she gets pissed off, because I'm like, yeah, it's raining, but we've got raincoats. And what an opportunity to go out and dance in the rain. She's like, why are you so bloody positive? You haven't even had your coffee yet. And I'm like, because I know if I start my day off with a couple of, like, not positive affirmations, because I think that's kind of been hijacked by like the hippie people, but just talking to yourself positively and going, what actions can I do? What missions can I complete today that's going to make me feel good? And that is the start of my state change. And my wife hates me for it, but yeah, it helps.
Yeah, and this stuff is like, it can be chucked in like the woo-woo category and all the rest of it. Of course it can. And if you took some of this stuff out of context and clipped it up, like, there'd probably be some of my mates that are taking the piss here and going, fucking hell, here's Richie's off on one again. But it's about consistency. It's about reps. Like, it's being fucking positive and having a vision for one day is not going to do a lot, is it? But I'll tell you what, if you do it for 15 years, I reckon you're going to be in an all right place. So it is about that consistency. You mentioned something there about having a choice about how you feel, like completely. I must have nicked it from a book somewhere, but this is going back to like early 20s or whatever. And I read something like you've got two choices at all times. Like you can either be an absolute fucking victim or you can be a victor. And that stuck with me for absolute years to the point where I was going to get it tattooed to remind myself at one point. And I generally remember, like, I'd wake up on a Monday, early 20s, been out on a weekend, had one too many ecstasy tablets, sorry mum, waking up on a Monday, and then I had to go to a call centre and make 200 calls a day. And I'm sat there in bed going, well, I was living in Bradford at the time, which, yeah, is a story for another day. And having to get the train to Leeds and waking up in the morning thinking, like, do I feel like going to this call centre and making 200 calls today? And then the question comes like, well, you've got two choices, mate. You're going to be a little victim or what? Or you're going to be a victor and fucking crack on with it. And I know it sounds cheesy and the rest of it, but those three words, without those three words, guess what? I'd have bailed. I wouldn't have gone in. And then what would have that done? That call centre job wouldn't have led me to the next job or the next opportunity. And that has a compounding effect, doesn't it? So yeah, it all sounds a little bit wacky, but like, apply some of this shit. It's hard. Like, it sounds a bit woo-woo. Sounds a bit like what some, new Instagram influencers posting because they've learned it from someone else but achieved nothing in their life and have tried to apply it for 6 weeks or whatever. Like, that's what it sounds like, yeah, but I'll tell you what, do it for a decade. I'd fucking put my house on that you're going to be in a good place. Like, 100%. So yeah, sometimes maybe it needs coming from a different voice as well than from how it's typically communicated, maybe as well.
Yeah, that's what I say a lot to recruitment founders is that, probably the biggest pain point I get from them is that, I sit down with the consultants and I'm coaching them and, I'm just not getting the most out of them or whatever it might be. And I always say to them, like, look, I'm not a magician. I'm not going to promise you that I'm going to come in and I'm going to get people to run through walls and pull thousands of jobs and hit records and stuff. But what I will say is I'm going to come in and be a different voice. And sometimes that's all you need. You just need a different voice to just give you a slightly different perspective on something. And it can kind of open up your mind and see things from different perspectives. So I agree a lot with what you were saying. One of the topics that we wanted to talk about as well, because it kind of goes into what we were just talking about, is kind of managing overwhelm. And I think we've touched on it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I've recently been there since setting up the podcast, where I've kind of made myself too busy and physically and mentally sort of burnt out a little bit. But what's your advice for people to manage being overwhelmed running their business, or even for people that are just a recruiter running their desk, which is essentially a business? What's your advice for people to manage overwhelm?
Yeah, good one. And people ask me this a lot. They're like, yeah, you're involved in so much stuff, Rich, and you're busy and you've got this on. And yeah, how do you manage overwhelm? So they do ask a lot. And again, like anything I advise, I can only advise on what works for me. And because some people are in a similar situation, there's maybe a chance it might work for them as well. So I'm not here going, this is how you manage overwhelm and 100% is going to work for you the first time you try it. But again, all I can advise is what works for me. So if overwhelm again is another label, so ultimately it's a label that we attach a feeling to. So ultimately, first and foremost, we might need to go back to the energy matrix. So we're feeling overwhelmed. Okay. What most people go wrong is they try and outthink it. So it's like, I'm overwhelmed. Like, I need to think about this stuff more. I need to think about it and have a plan for it. We're not going to outthink it. So first and foremost, it's like, right, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Like, I need to get a check on it. And first and foremost, for me anyway, it's getting my energy in check. And whatever that is, whatever's on that top right or top left, do I want to be in a low energetic, pleasant state or a high energetic, pleasant state? Okay, what are the things? Like, let me remind myself because I forget and I've got a shit memory. Okay, let's start off there. Let's bring some of those into play and get the energy in the right place first and foremost. Okay, step one. Sometimes it's a case of just do that. It's like, why the fuck am I overwhelmed? We also need to think about framing this as well. So, okay, I'm overwhelmed. Why am I overwhelmed? Because I'm in a position of responsibility. I've got a child to look after. I've got a house to look after. I've got all these responsibilities. What a fucking privilege. Like, I remember someone saying to me years ago, like, pressure's a privilege. I'm like, fucking hell, it is as well. Like, so there's an element that we can be sometimes grateful for being overwhelmed. And some of these little things are just a case of, okay, yeah, no, this isn't so bad. Like, you're not running away with being overwhelmed. And most people do live in a state of overwhelm. And then the next thing, which I really enjoy doing, because it makes me feel absolutely stupid, is a process called cognitive diffusion. And it's about objectively breaking down everything that's in front of me. And I do this with people who are maybe, I don't know, yeah, business owner that might have to do some sales calls or some BD or some outreach. And it's just like, I just can't get to it. It all feels like, or I can't write this social media post or whatever task it is. It's a case of, I more so have to do it when I've got to sort my laundry room out, because that's the stuff that I'm shit at, that I'll get overwhelmed at. So it's kind of like breaking down the task, like completely objectively, and writing it down. So we create so much feeling around what we've got to do, and like that feeling's just made up shit. Like, it doesn't need to be there. So if we broke it down in terms of like, in some stuff that some guys might be able to recognize on listening to this podcast, like recruitment, I don't know, I've got to make 25 BD calls today, for instance. Okay, we're feeling overwhelmed. It's like we're putting all this feeling on it. We're making up all these stories in our head. What if I fucking fluff my lines? What if I do this? What if I do this? Actually, let's break it down in terms of what you've actually got to do, completely objectively. You've got to, okay, I've got to pick up the phone today. I've got to press some numbers. I don't think it still works that way, does it? I'm going back to my days in recruitment where it was like physically picking up a phone and dialing some numbers. And then I've got to talk. Like, those three things, I've done those three things before. And it's just breaking it down into really, really simple terms. And a lot of BD nowadays, it's like, I don't know, send 20 outreach messages on LinkedIn. Okay, got to pick my phone up. Got to press a few buttons. I've got to press send and then go to the next one. Just really breaking tasks down to the point where you just feel fucking stupid. In a good way, like, as in stupid, why am I getting overwhelmed about this? I've just got to get the task done. And I think that's a big thing, like whether it's sales, whether it's BD, whether it's anything, like we attach so much feeling to everything, and we all do because we're human beings. But it's about being aware enough to recognize that and go through, work out your own little way. Like, that works for me. That 3-step formula works for me. But again, it's a case of like, yeah, you might try that and aspects work, but finding your own little ways to get through that. But it's typical, and it's a great question because overwhelm comes up maybe for a lot of your audience, but certainly does for a lot of the guys that I work with as well.
Awesome. Well, Rich, we're coming towards the end of the episode, and as I always ask every single guest, how can viewers/listeners following today's show be 1% better in recruitment?
I think I can only answer it probably a little bit more holistic than recruitment, because I'm not going to get specific about being a recruitment consultant on this occasion, I suppose. But I think, and typically the things that I say just like reminders to myself as well. But the gold is typically in the stuff that you're avoiding. So the stuff that you keep putting off, the stuff that you're avoiding, I can't do that because it's out of my comfort zone. Like, it's typically there, and we could apply that to any area of life, can't we? But we could certainly apply it to recruitment as well. Whether it's a marketing exercise, whether it's putting yourself out there, but you're worried about what other people would think of you and all that type of stuff. Like, typically it's the stuff that you're avoiding that is going to yield the best results. So lean into that. Like, give it a go. Typically where the outcomes are anyway.
Love it. Awesome. Rich, thank you so much for coming on, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm assuming for people to reach out to you for your services, or even just to reach out to you in general, would it just be your LinkedIn, or is there any other sort of ways for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, I think I've not got an OnlyFans yet, but yeah, I think LinkedIn's probably the best bet, mate.
Wicked. All right, nice one. Thank you very much, Rich. Really, really appreciate your time, mate. And yeah, hopefully, oh well, not hopefully. I genuinely think anyone that listens to this will just take so much value. And I always say that literally since I set this podcast up, every single time I sit down with people, I come away learning so much myself. So from a selfish point of view, like I've learned. So I'm pretty sure people are going to come away with a shitload of value. So again, mate, like I can't say thank you enough. I think it's been an awesome episode. Thank you so much.
Legend. Well, I've enjoyed it, so thanks for having us on, and looking forward to catching up soon, Charles.
Nice one.
Legend.